The night is cold, and there is no roof. Somewhere in Africa, 40,000 years ago, a man lies down on the bare earth beside a low, dying fire. No mattress, no pillow, no walls between him and the dark. The wind moves through the grass. A predator calls somewhere far off. And yet, here is the part almost nobody expects. This man, sleeping on the ground in the open, with nothing but an animal hide and his own body heat, may have been experiencing something closer to your body's true design than anything happening in your bedroom tonight. Not more comfortable, closer to default, because the way you sleep, tucked into 8 consolidated hours behind blackout curtains, is a surprisingly recent habit. And the way your ancestors slept has a lot more science behind it than most people realize. Science that, once you actually dig into it, turns out to be far messier and far more interesting than the version you've probably already heard. Here's the popular claim, the one that shows up in almost every article about this topic. Ancient humans, the story goes, didn't sleep in one long stretch the way you try to. They slept in 2 shifts, a first sleep and a second sleep, with a quiet waking period in between. It's a compelling idea. It even has a real scientific name, biphasic sleep. But before you accept it as the full story of how your ancestors slept, you need to know where that idea actually comes from, and where the evidence starts to get complicated. The strongest historical evidence for segmented sleep doesn't come from the Paleolithic at all. It comes from historian A. Roger Eckerch, whose research at Virginia Tech uncovered hundreds of references, court records, diaries, medical texts, and literature describing something Europeans in the centuries before widespread artificial lighting called first sleep and second sleep. People would go to bed shortly after dark, wake naturally in the middle of the night for an hour or so, pray, talk, have sex, tend a fire, then return to a second period of sleep until morning. Eckerch's work, published extensively in the late 1990s and early 2000s, documents this pattern appearing so consistently across pre-industrial European sources that he argues it wasn't unusual at all. It was simply normal. That's genuinely fascinating evidence, but notice what it actually covers. Medieval and early modern Europe, not the deep Paleolithic past your ancestors actually lived through for the overwhelming majority of human history. So the question becomes, does this segmented pattern reach back further into the world of hunter-gatherers living without walls, calendars, or candlelight at all? This is where the story takes its first real turn. Because when researchers went looking for biphasic sleep in modern hunter-gatherer societies, hoping to find a living window into humanity's deep past, they didn't find what they expected. Neuroscientist Jerome Siegel at UCLA led an extensive study monitoring sleep patterns across 3 traditional societies with no access to electricity or artificial lighting: the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, and the Titsamani of Bolivia. Using wrist monitors that tracked actual sleep and wake periods over extended stretches, Siegel's team found something that directly complicates the popular biphasic narrative. These groups slept in a single, largely consolidated period each night, not 2 distinct shifts. Average sleep duration ran shorter than you might expect, too, typically between 6 and 7 hours, considerably less than the 8-hour target most sleep advice pushes today. So which version is true? Did your ancestors sleep in 2 segmented shifts or 1 consolidated block? Here's the uncomfortable, honest answer. Both patterns appear to be real, just not necessarily describing the same populations, the same time periods, or the same circumstances. Segmented sleep shows up clearly and repeatedly in pre-industrial European historical records. Consolidated single-period sleep shows up clearly in modern hunter-gatherer societies living far from Europe's historical context. Human sleep, it turns out, may never have followed one single universal ancient pattern at all. It may have always been shaped heavily by climate, season, safety, and culture, exactly the kind of variation you'd expect from a species that spread across nearly every environment on Earth. But underneath that variation, Researchers have identified something that does appear to be a genuine, deep biological difference between how your ancestors slept and how you sleep now. Not the number of segments, the relationship between sleep and darkness itself. Sleep physiologist Kenneth Wright at the University of Colorado Boulder ran an experiment that gets at this directly. His team took a group of modern volunteers, people living completely normal, artificially lit lives, and sent them camping for a week with no phones, no flashlights, no artificial light sources of any kind, just natural sunlight and darkness. Within days, something remarkable happened. Their circadian rhythms, the internal biological clocks governing sleep and wakefulness, shifted dramatically, syncing far more tightly to the actual rising and setting of the sun than their normal, electrically lit lives ever allowed. They fell asleep earlier, they woke up earlier, and critically, the timing became far more consistent, night after night, once artificial light was removed from the equation entirely. This is the part of the story that connects everything together. Your ancestors weren't necessarily sleeping in some exotic, alien pattern completely unlike anything you experience. They were almost certainly sleeping in far tighter alignment with actual sunrise and sunset than you do, because they had no other choice. No screens glowing at midnight, no streetlights bleeding through curtains, no refrigerator light interrupting a trip to the kitchen. Just the sun, the fire, and true uninterrupted darkness once that fire burned low. Modern artificial light didn't just give you the option to stay awake later. Research building on Wright's findings suggests it may have fundamentally altered how tightly your internal clock syncs to the natural world at all, pushing your biological rhythms later and later, night after night, in ways your ancestors' bodies simply never experienced. There's another layer to this story worth sitting with, one that has nothing to do with clocks or light at all, and everything to do with why sleeping on open, exposed ground even worked as a survival strategy in the first place. Some researchers studying sleep architecture, the pattern of light sleep, deep sleep, and REM cycles across a night, have proposed that lighter, more easily interrupted sleep stages may have carried genuine evolutionary value for a species regularly exposed to predators and environmental threats throughout the night. A brief waking period in the middle of the night, the exact kind of period Ekirch documented in historical European sources, may not have simply been cultural habit. It may have doubled as a built-in safety check, a chance to listen, assess, tend the fire, and confirm the camp was still secure before returning to sleep. Notice what that means. The very thing modern sleep advice treats as a failure, waking in the middle of the night and lying there for a while before falling back asleep, may not be a malfunction at all. It may be an old, deeply embedded piece of your biology, one that made perfect sense when waking briefly could mean noticing a predator, a dying fire, or a change in the weather before it became a genuine threat. You didn't inherit a broken sleep system. You may have inherited an intact one, operating in an environment it was never designed for. So where does that leave you, lying in bed tonight, phone screen still glowing faintly on the nightstand? Not with a simple, tidy answer about ancient humans sleeping in 2 mysterious shifts while you sleep wrong in one. The real picture is messier, more honest, and in some ways more useful than that. Your ancestors' sleep patterns varied by climate, culture, and circumstance, the same way sleep varies across the world today. But almost universally, their sleep stayed tightly bound to actual darkness, uninterrupted by anything resembling the artificial light flooding your evenings right now. That's the piece of ancient sleep you're most disconnected from. Not the number of shifts, but the darkness itself, and the biological rhythm that darkness used to enforce automatically, long before anyone needed an alarm clock, a sleep app, or a bedtime routine to manage something your body once handled entirely on its own. So the next time you find yourself wide awake at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling, resist the urge to assume something has gone wrong. Somewhere in your biology, there may be an old, quiet instinct, still checking the fire, still listening to the dark. still running a routine your ancestors relied on for tens of thousands of nights before you were ever born. The roof is new. The mattress is new. The wide-awake feeling at 3 in the morning, that part might be older than you ever imagined.